What's up guys, I'm KBHD here, and it turns out it's phone season, or there's just a lot of phones coming out right now. Welcome to your first look at another phone that may be a bit under your radar, maybe because of how many phones they've come out with lately, but this one should be. So this is the Oppo Find X2 Pro. So I've had this phone for about a week now, and I've been very impressed with it. And it's also, you might have remembered the last video was the S20 Ultra review. This phone has two big advantages that it's focusing on that are one-upping that Galaxy S20 Ultra. Also, this video is sponsored by Oppo, so this is a highlight video, not a review, but there is some cool stuff to show, so let's just dive right into it. So the design is pretty classic for a big smartphone, a big modern phone in 2020. Stop me if you've seen this before. Big, shiny glass and ceramic sandwich, a huge display with thin bezels, the main speaker and USB Type-C at the bottom, no headphone jack. And then there's the chamfered edges, the antenna bands around the outside, the hole punch display up top too in the corner. You know, it's looking pretty familiar. But it does have this like micro texture in the glass. And it's barely etched in there, and you can feel it. It doesn't make it less slippery, but you can feel the difference versus just smooth glass. And you can kind of see it if you hold the phone at the right angle and it hits the light. Looks like ridges of a fingerprint. I don't know, I kind of like it. In terms of specs inside, Snapdragon 865, check. 12 gigs of RAM and half a terabyte of UFS 3.0 storage, check, check. The battery is 4,260 milliamp hours, so a solid size, but not the biggest. And you have the optical fingerprint reader underneath the display glass that seems to work about as well as any other I've seen from OnePlus, for example. And then, I'm just gonna be perfectly honest, I've never really been a huge fan of Oppo's software, but this newest version of ColorOS 7.1, it's been one of the most interesting and impressive new parts of the phone to me. It's cleaned up a lot, and they're proud of how much cleaner it is. It's more customizable to be set up the way you like, and they've included a couple more things like stock Google apps and the stock Google keyboard as the default. And some of the Oppo stuff still appears alongside the Google version in the app drawer, but you can disable one or the other, or just stick with the Google version, which is what I'm gonna do. There's also a multi-user mode, which is something I've wanted in more phones and especially tablets over the years. That is smart. And there's a dark mode as well. And there's also this little sidebar over here that you can keep a bunch of shortcuts in, kind of like what we've seen on Samsung phones. By default, the screen recording is in here for 1080p screen recording. And then I've just set up my Tasks app and my Weather app for quick access. Or you might put your Messenger or TikTok, I don't know, I'm not here to judge. Whatever you want, you can put it in that sidebar over there, that's up to you. And then you can also pin apps in the RAM. So you just hit the lock button up here in the multitasker. So again, I've locked the Tasks app in my RAM and it'll never leave. And I open it constantly and it doesn't have to reload. And this might be useful for some people with bigger apps or games that you play like all the time that you don't want to stop running. You just want them to keep them loaded in the RAM. That's the advantage of having 12 gigs of RAM. So that's a lot of good stuff already. But the two main focuses with this phone are the display and the cameras. I'm gonna start with the screen. So this is a 6.7 inch 1440p Quad HD, 120 hertz AMOLED display. And yes, it's all of those things at the same time. See, you can see it right here in the settings. If you were like me, you were wondering why the S20 Ultra didn't have that. Was it a Snapdragon 865 limitation? No, this phone has a Snapdragon 865 and it enables that, and it's beautiful. You have your independent selections for the refresh rate and resolution. Now, to be fair, 120 hertz at 1080p, as we've seen, looks pretty much fine, and you can turn on actually auto select resolution, so it'll toggle up or down for you based on saving battery, and that's something you might want to do. Maybe if it was a 5,000 or 6,000 milliamp hour battery, I'd leave it on full resolution, high speed all the time, but 4260 isn't exactly maxing it out, so you might want to turn this off from time to time. But let me know if you'd be interested in a full review of this phone. I think if I'm dailying this thing, that's like the #1 concern is how long does the battery last if you just max it out? Now there's also the color calibration and a bunch of different modes that let you customize things like color temperature on a slider, or you can turn on natural tone or nature tone display, which is basically true tone. It changes the color temperature based on the ambient light around you. The only thing I didn't really like is it still has the curved edges, as you can see, and they are quite curved, like Samsung's done in the past, to the point where you can see some of the content like bleeding over the sides very dramatically. That tends to give you more accidental presses, as we know, but this phone still wants to keep that near bezel-less look. So yeah, the display is a big point on this phone. The other is the cameras. So this is the Ultra Vision camera system on the back, and that is a big camera bump. So around the back here, you're looking at a 48 megapixel main camera, a 48 megapixel ultra wide, and a 13 megapixel 5x periscope telephoto camera. And this camera bump, as you can see, it's gigantic, yes. The rest of the phone is pretty trim actually, but the double bump on the back being all the way over to one side means it'll for sure rock on a table without a case. But they're hoping that what they can get out of these cameras will justify it, and any literature on this phone or their presentations will pretty much all suggest, yeah, the camera is the most important feature of this phone. So, I have limited experience with it so far, but I've shot with it for a bit and I can show you what I've found. Basically, I've been really happy with two things: sharpness and color. And you don't hear me say color very often when talking about smartphone cameras, but this camera, for whatever reason, just nails white balance often, and then tones and hues and skin tones, and in general, color is very accurate, which is great. Dynamic range isn't as good. Even when I turn HDR on, in more extreme dynamic range situations, you're more likely to lose sky or lose your shadows, and exposure isn't as consistent as I've wanted. It's also a big primary sensor again, so it'll suffer from some of the same big sensor, big aperture problems we saw on the S20 Ultra. But on any other further away subjects, the natural blur is solid. It's generally a high quality, fast camera. Yeah, I was also really impressed with how well the night mode worked as well. I took some low light photos and they speak here for themselves. Night modes have gotten really good in smartphones in the past 2 years. And then it will let you go up to 60x zoom with the periscope zoom here. So now you know the number. I don't recommend zooming in all the way, but there you have it. It's just slightly short of the 100x. And one other spec that it falls slightly short of the S20 Ultra is 8K video. It doesn't do 8K video, but what it will do is max out at 4K 60 from any of the cameras. And just looking at the video, I'm again super happy with the colors. I mean, somebody get the image processing team at Oppo and give them a pat on the back for this one, because that is some really solid, accurate color in a lot of places where many smartphone cameras have had trouble for me. So that's basically it. A phone you might not expect to hear much about is actually making waves in some of the things people care most about, which are camera and screen, and for me, also software. Plus there's a bunch of other little things. The ceramic material is nice. The 65 watt super VOOC fast charging. It's at the expense of not having wireless charging, but we've seen this before. Smartphone makers like OnePlus doubling down on the super fast charging that they really believe in. And the haptic engine on this phone is also excellent. It's hard to show through video, but the spec on paper is it has the largest X-axis motor in any Android phone, and I can tell. So there you go. A lot of really solid first impressions on the Find X2 Pro, and it sort of brought me to this, maybe it's a realization, or maybe we've kind of known this already, but that overkill specs are like the new norm in a lot of these high-end smartphones now, and it's just what we can come to expect. But let me know if you'd be interested in a full review of this dark horse phone. Also, the merch is finally back, so if you want to go to shop.mkbht.com, all of it is currently available. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys very soon in the next one. March is gonna start to run as well. February had a lot. March, it's still all happening. See you guys later. Peace.